So imagine, if you will, we are standing on the banks of a canal and you're surrounded by, I don't know, like 20 of the most boring people you can possibly think of. There's a bunch of these people, right, wearing suits, and over in the distance, down the other end of the canal, there's like this like whining motor noise, you know? And everyone's like, what's that? And so they're like leaning over the edge, like checking out what's coming. And this little dot at the end of the canal just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until finally it's like, and for like the barest fraction of a second, we see a speedboat. And behind the wheel, is there a wheel on a speedboat? Behind the, like in the helm of that speedboat is your favorite, most fast-moving, blindingly intelligent entrepreneur is like, you know, but with some friends, right? And in that fraction of a second, when the speedboat goes by, all of the management consultants pull out their phones and they're like, they manage to like take a photo in just that split second of the boat going by and the rise and fall of the spray of water that comes out the other side. And they go back to their offices and they calculate the exact rise and fall of the water, and they figure out the exact velocity of the boat, and then they put all of that into like a 2x2 grid in a PowerPoint thing and go and sell it to people. Someone writes a book about it, right? Some of the people leap into the water and start just like splashing around, you know, like making their own little waves, right? Like, but none of those people is in a speedboat. And this is sort of how I like to think of having an unfair advantage, is that the process of doing all of this feels very, very different from the shore than it does behind the helm of the boat. And the funny thing is that we see other people's speedboats zipping by when they're at maximum velocity. What we don't see is 10 years of hanging out in a garage building the damn thing. So what we want to get excited about is not being in our personal entrepreneurial speedboat. We want to get excited about building a speedboat, about sitting in a mechanic's workshop for however many years it takes, learning how the hell they work in the first place. And that's kind of how unfair advantage works. In the end, you will have one. At the start, you won't. And we want to get excited about the process of building one. Unfair advantage is like the meanest part of the canvas. This is the bit where we're kind of nasty, right? We want to think like, what is the thing that we have that no one else has? And even if they want it, they can't get it. It's like other people are going to look at what we do and go, I have no chance of competing with them because I will never have their IP, their algorithm, their employee, their social media likes. I know someone that runs a business and one of their main supporters is literally the prince of the country where they work. That's a really unfair advantage. And the relationship with that prince is not something that anyone else can go and buy at a shop. And that's what makes it unfair. In the book Running Lean, which is a really good kind of lean textbook, Ash talks about an unfair advantage being hard to buy, copy, or steal. So what's an advantage that's hard to buy? For example, reputation of a person or a brand. There's only one Rolex in the world. And even though there's lots of fake Rolexes, you can't buy being Rolex because they're the only people that are Rolex. What about copying? So a good example is Google's search ranking algorithm. You know, it's like which pages show up where on Google. It's what makes Google run, and the code is literally hidden in a server somewhere. You can't easily copy it because it's hidden. Or it could be like the secret sauce physically in like a food product. You know, it's like, unless you know exactly what herbs and spices are used, you can't copy it. An unfair advantage that is hard to steal is something like a network effect. So if a business functions when lots and lots of people use it, like an instant messaging platform, it's hard to steal that network away because everybody's already used to using the thing that their friends are all on. So the unfortunate reality about starting a business is that, well, reality is unfair. You know, it's like business favors nepotism and like it's who you know, not what you know, and like if you have friends in high places. So as much as we want life to be fair, it's not. And this is just kind of recognizing that we're going to use some of that unfairness for our advantage. Step 1, realize that life is unfair, get comfortable with life being unfair, and get excited about having an unfair advantage in your business. Step 2, do an audit. Like, look at your canvas and go, which of the bits in this is hard to copy or steal or borrow by our competitors or some new company that copies us. Now, step 3 might be realizing that you don't actually have an unfair advantage. Most startups don't when they start. Step 4 is to figure out what advantage do we have now that might be small that we can work on, so it grows into a really big and really unfair advantage. You might be able to do something faster than anyone else, so all the competitors can't catch up. Or you might build a network effect into your company that once it's established is really hard to shake. If you're struggling with your unfair advantage, think about something you can start building that will turn into an unfair advantage. If you remember the vitamin painkiller oxygen test, we can apply that to your unfair advantage. For example, Google Maps started as a vitamin level solution, right? It was a nice to have 15 years ago. Google Maps was really clunky at the start, but then they purchased a whole ton of satellite data and integrated it, which suddenly made it more useful. Then they bought and made Google Earth, and then they started driving cars around with cameras on them everywhere, and they cemented the unfair advantage that they had created by building Google Maps in the first place. And so it's like the unfair advantage that happened at the end was that they own all the data, they own all the 3D mapping of buildings, they own every picture they've taken of your house by driving a car down the front of it. So it's like they started with just online mapping is cool, and they finished with we own the only online map worth talking about. Sorry, Apple. So even if you don't want to be a tech monopoly, maybe think a little bit googly about it. Like, what in 15 years can you add on to and secure over time that will give you an unfair advantage against the competition? Businesses that rely on the specialness of the founder are generally not great businesses. Even thinking about your team as an unfair advantage is also, it's not that unfair. So if that's really your focus, maybe it's the systems, culture, and way of working. If you or your team leave, you want the unfair advantage to stick around. If your unfair advantage is that you will win and be the best and have a monopoly, that's like an end goal. That's not an unfair advantage that will help you get there. That's not something you can actually build. That's the consequence of building good things. Gosh, if you're stressing about unfair advantage, stop stressing about it. Everyone stresses about it, and they're like, I need to have an oil field and men with guns. Like, you don't need to have a small army to have an unfair advantage. Sometimes just moving quickly is enough for now. Such a boring conclusion, but the most direct route to an unfair advantage is just discipline. When you see somebody who is just phenomenal at their craft and you're like, wow, you're so lucky, you're so talented. And in their head they're going, oh, my talent is 10 hours of freaking work a day for the last 10 years on this thing. It's like you work hard on something that nobody else wants to work hard on, and then in 5 years they're all jealous. There's a very good chance that those guys don't like driving speedboats. 5-10 years ago they fell in love with making them. And no one paid them to do it, and they just sat in a workshop like, this is so cool, how do motors work? I have no idea, let's figure it out. And they just dug into the joy of building a thing for a while. Suddenly people are saying, I would like one of those, can you sell it to me? It's very hard to build an unfair advantage that you don't want to build. Whereas if you are willing to do a thing that no one else is willing to do and fall in love with doing that thing, not only do you build an unfair advantage, but you build a career that is worth living for. Oh, yuck, I just realized what I said, and that's disgusting. It's true though.